In the tranquil and picturesque town of Willow Creek, where the air was fresh with the scent of blooming flowers and the streets were lined with charming houses, life moved at a gentle pace. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other by name, where neighbors exchanged pleasantries over white picket fences, and where time seemed to slow down, offering a peaceful escape from the hustle and bustle of the outside world. Among the quaint streets of Willow Creek lay Elm Street, a particularly idyllic stretch lined with grand old homes, each with its own history and character. It was here that Emma and Jake, a young couple brimming with hopes and dreams, decided to start their new life together. They had been searching for the perfect home for months, and when they stumbled upon the charming old house on Elm Street, felt as though fate had guided them there. The house was a picture of timeless beauty, a relic from a bygone era with its Victorian architecture, tall windows that seemed to watch over the street, and a sprawling garden filled with vibrant flowers and ancient oak trees. As they stepped through the creaking front door for the first time, Emma and Jake were filled with a sense of wonder. This was it. This was the place where they would build their future, where they would create memories that would last a lifetime. But as they began to settle into their new home, that initial excitement started to wane, giving way to an unsettling feeling that they couldn't quite shake. It began with little things. Creak of the floorboards when no one was around, a sudden draft that chilled the room despite the warm summer weather, and the feeling that they were being watched. But they dismissed these occurrences as the quirks of an old house, the kind of things that added to its character. However, their unease grew when they met their neighbor, Mrs. Thompson. From the moment they laid eyes on her, there was something about her that set Emma on edge. Mrs. Thompson was an elderly woman, well into her 70s, with a sharp gaze that seemed to pierce through to one's very soul. She had lived on Elm Street for as long as anyone could remember, and she seemed to know everything about everyone in the neighborhood. Emma and Jake had always valued their privacy, but Mrs. Thompson was the kind of neighbor who was always around, always watching. She would appear on her front porch at the most unexpected times, her eyes following them as they went about their day. Whenever they would cross paths, she would strike up conversations that, while polite on the surface, were laced with probing questions and thinly veiled comments that made Emma feel as though she and Jake were being sized up. Despite her unease, Emma tried to brush off her feelings about Mrs. Thompson, convincing herself the old woman was simply lonely and curious about her new neighbors. After all, it wasn't uncommon for older folks to take an interest in the comings and goings of those around them. But as time went on, the unsettling atmosphere around their home only intensified. It wasn't just Mrs. Thompson's prying eyes that bothered them. Strange occurrences began to unfold within the house. Unexplained noises in the middle of the night, objects mysteriously moving from where they had been left, and shadows that seemed to dance just out of sight. Emma could feel the tension building, a knot of anxiety tightening in her chest with each passing day. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a deep shade of indigo, Emma made a discovery that sent a chill down her spine. As she was locking up the house for the night, she noticed a small piece of paper slipped under the front door. Bending down to pick it up, she unfolded the note and felt her heart race as she read the cryptic message scrawled in jagged handwriting. "Beware the dangers, Elm Street." The note was unsigned, and the words were enough to send a shiver of fear coursing through her. Emma rushed to show the note to Jake, who tried to reassure her that it was probably just a prank, maybe from some local kids trying to spook the new neighbors. But deep down, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that this was something more, something far more sinister. From that moment on, the atmosphere in the house changed. It felt as though the walls were closing in on them, and the once charming house that had filled them with such joy now seemed to harbor dark secrets. The strange occurrences only escalated. Doors that were securely locked would be found wide open in the morning. Mirrors would fog up as if someone had been breathing heavily in front of them. And there was an ever-present sense of being watched. Emma's thoughts kept returning to Mrs. Thompson. Was she behind these strange events? Could she have sent the note? The more Emma thought about it, the more convinced she became that their mysterious neighbor was hiding something. Something that she didn't want them to discover. But what could it be? And why would she go to such lengths to keep them in the dark? The turning point came one fateful night when Emma was awoken by a loud crash coming from downstairs. Her heart pounded in her chest as she shook Jake awake, the two of them creeping down the stairs with bated breath. But when they reached the bottom, They found nothing out of place, no sign of an intruder. It was as if the house itself was playing tricks on them, toying with their nerves. But Emma's instincts told her that this was no mere prank or coincidence. She felt it in her bones. Something was terribly wrong, and she and Jake were at the center of it. It was at this point that they realized they needed help, someone who could unravel the mystery that was slowly consuming their lives. Enter Detective Harper, a seasoned investigator known for her sharp mind and dogged determination. When Emma and Jake brought their concerns to the local police, it was Harper who was assigned to the case. From the moment she stepped onto Elm Street, she knew that this was no ordinary investigation. The air was thick with tension, and there was a palpable sense of unease that hung over the neighborhood like a dark cloud. As Harper began her investigation, she quickly discovered that Mrs. Thompson's late husband had been a private investigator, a fact that raised more questions than it answered. What had he been investigating? And why had Mrs. Thompson never mentioned it? Harper's instincts told her that the answers to these questions were key to solving the mystery. The deeper Harper dug into the past, the more disturbing the picture became. She uncovered old case files, records of investigations that Mr. Thompson had conducted before his untimely death. These files contained details of the residents of Willow Creek, secrets that had been carefully hidden away, secrets that, if exposed, would ruin lives. It became clear that Mr. Thompson had stumbled upon something dark and dangerous, something that had ultimately cost him his life. But what Harper found even more troubling was the realization that Mrs. Thompson had been using this information to her advantage. She had been blackmailing her neighbors, using the secrets her husband had uncovered to manipulate and control them. The old woman who had seemed merely nosy and intrusive was, in fact, a cunning and dangerous player in a much larger game. Emma and Jake, meanwhile, were growing increasingly desperate. Strange occurrences in their home had reached a fever pitch, and they felt as though they were being watched every moment of the day. Their once peaceful lives had been turned upside down, and they knew that they were in grave danger. But what could they do? Who could they trust? As they searched for answers, Jake made a discovery that would change everything. In the attic of their old house, hidden behind a false wall, he found a room that had been sealed off for decades. Inside, he found old files, photographs, and documents that detailed the lives of the people who had lived in Willow Creek over the years. These files were not just records. They were the evidence of a long and sordid history of deceit, betrayal, and lies. Emma and Jake pored over the documents, piecing together a puzzle that revealed the true nature of the town they had chosen to call home. They discovered that the people of Willow Creek were not as innocent as they appeared. Beneath the surface of this seemingly perfect town lay a web of corruption and greed, and at the center of it all was Mrs. Thompson. The tension continued to build as Detective Harper's investigation progressed. She was getting closer to the truth, but with each step forward, the danger increased. Someone in Willow Creek was determined to keep the past buried, someone who would stop at nothing to protect their secrets. Harper began to receive threats, her car was vandalized, and she felt as though she was being followed. Then, one night, as she was leaving the police station, Harper was attacked. The assailant came out of nowhere, striking her from behind and leaving her unconscious on the pavement. When she came to, her investigation files were gone, stolen by someone who was determined to stop her from uncovering the truth. Meanwhile, Emma and Jake were reaching their breaking point. They knew that they couldn't go on like this, living in fear and uncertainty. They decided to confront Mrs. Thompson, to demand answers once and for all. But when they arrived at her house, they were met with a shocking revelation. Mrs. Thompson, it turned out, was not the villain they had imagined her to be. Yes, she had been blackmailing her neighbors, but she had done so out of desperation, out of fear for her own life. She revealed to Emma and Jake that there was a powerful figure in Willow Creek, someone who had been pulling the strings from behind the scenes for years. This person had used Mr. Thompson's investigation to their advantage, eliminating anyone who threatened to expose them. Mrs. Thompson had been protecting herself, trying to survive in a town where the line between right and wrong had long since been blurred. She had become a player in a dangerous game, one that she knew she could not win. But she also knew that Emma and Jake were different. They had the courage to stand up to the darkness that had consumed Willow Creek. With Mrs. Thompson's reluctant assistance, Emma and Jake began to pull apart the final threads of the mystery that had ensnared them. They uncovered the true identity of the villain, Mayor Victor Langston, town's most powerful and influential figure. Langston had been quietly manipulating and controlling Willow Creek for years, using his wealth, influence, and a trove of incriminating secrets to maintain his iron grip on the town. It was Langston who orchestrated the blackmail, threats, and even the brutal attack on Detective Harper, all in a calculated effort to protect his sinister empire and keep his dark deeds hidden. In a tense and dramatic showdown, Emma and Jake confronted Langston, stripping away his carefully crafted facade to expose the ruthless tyrant beneath. As the extent of his crimes came to light, fear that had gripped Willow Creek for so long finally began to lift. Detective Harper, battered but undeterred, arrived just in time to arrest Langston, bringing an end to his reign of terror and ensuring that justice would finally be served. As the sun rose over Willow Creek, the shadows that had haunted the town for so long finally began to lift. Truth was out in the open, and the people of the town could finally begin to heal. Emma and Jake, having faced down their fears and triumphed over them, decided to stay in Willow Creek. It was their home now, and they had made it a safer place for everyone. But even as they settled back into their lives, they knew that the events of the past few months would stay with them forever. They had seen the darkness that lay beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect town, and they had survived it. And as they looked out over Elm Street, they knew that they would always be vigilant, always watchful, for the secrets that had been uncovered were not easily forgotten. Willow Creek was a town reborn, but it would never be the same. And as Emma and Jake looked forward to their future, they did so with a newfound understanding of the fragility of the peace they had fought so hard to protect. The mysterious neighbor, the hidden secrets, and the final showdown had changed them, but they had emerged stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead.